Okay, Shalom Aleichem. It is my honor and privilege that we have with us Chashav Agast. There is very few jobs, descriptions that Svarim say that you need to have special qualifications to get the job. Lamashal, to be, let's say, a sofer, you need to have special qualifications. To be a Malamed in the Chassidische Welt, the Friedrich Rebbe Sichus, you know that Malamed Tanoikis, that was the Yerushalayim. A Sheikhit, if I would, and you read this, the Baal Shem Tov's descriptions of a Sheikhit, you read the Friedrich Rebbe's descriptions of a Sheikhit, the Sheikhit and the Rav were the most prominent people in the city. So we have over here, Baruch Hashem, we live in a place where there's a lot of places where they shecht, and I managed to chap Rabbi Yitzchak Deren, and I asked him that he comes by from time to time and he shechts in different places here, and over the years I actually had Rabbi, I'm sure you know some of them, Rabbi Turk. I interviewed Rabbi Turk for a long time once. This was in New York. And I think there's other people I interviewed in Yonah Shchita and in Yonah Melicha. But because we have, in learning Yeridea, we learn Melicha, so I know your Yotze V'Nichnas, which is a concept that we learn in Yeridea a lot. So could you help us? We learned in Yonah in Halacha. Wij starten in Yonah Kumitz and Rav with a chicken. And he says, Rav, help me, this is a question, I have a shayla. The Rav gesagt, Abe, this is the lev. Is this treif? Abe, this is the Abe, this is the.
Das ist a kurkavan.
Yeah, okay, that's how we learn. We need you to help us out. So
You want to see the kurkavan?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't bring a kurkavan, but anyway.
So let's discuss some of the halacha lemaisa. Okay. One of the things that come about we're learning now halacha lemaisa is melicha. I was actually very shocked. You told me that you had to spend some time. My father, all of a sudden, spent time in with you in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. I think it was about 20 years ago, maybe even more. And I remember that one time my father came back and said that he was going to the Rabbonim in Crown Heights because he didn't like the type of salt they were using. So that's what the melicha needs. The Shulchan Aruch speaks about specific salt. Is there anything you could tell us about the melach, dak, gasa? Tell us something about the experience that you know about the salt. Is there anything that you could share with us?
Okay, so there's the halacha, as you say, and you know that the halacha is that it has to be somewhat gas, right? But the remes is that even table salt probably qualifies to be melach gas. If it's dak, is the pshat that it's almost like a powder, and that's a problem, halacha, because it won't draw. But in the industry, it's not so much about what's halachically acceptable, what's practically acceptable. I remember when your father, Olav Shalom, came to Pittsburgh, he came as a shliach and was Amashim Dvorken, as his representative. And his main thing was because of the nikur, which means the removing of the gidei dam. That was his expertise. But obviously he was there, and they looked into other things as well, such as the melicha. There they used to do the melicha. Each piece of meat was hanging on the chain. It would come out of the shriya. It was hanging, and they had a hose that blew the salt. So in order for the salt to stick, right, if it was too thick, right? It would bounce off. It just wouldn't stick. So if I remember, I don't recall exactly, but I think that was the issue, that he wasn't happy because maybe it was a little bit too thick and it wasn't sticking well. We actually changed the salt then, and we found that there was the difference between Morton's to Diamonds or Diamond to Morton. I'm not sure which one it was, but the one that we traded to actually ended up working a lot better. When it would shoot out of the hose, it would actually stick onto the meat and it would stay, and that the issue was resolved.
Do they still do with shooting?
No, this is a plant that is not in existence anymore. This was the plant that your father, Olav Shalom, came to. It does not exist. It's been.
But do they?
No, I haven't seen that repeated anywhere.
Any reason?
Anywhere.
Any reason for that?
So there's practical reasons. I actually, because there was shooting from a hose that had to blow with a blower, it was creating a lot of salt dust, and it was corroding the whole plant. So it was
It has nothing to do with the halachic.
No, it was not a halachic issue. So today, I don't think there's anybody who does it that way. I know that in Postville, they recently, a few years ago, they put in a whole system for melicha, which includes, the shria, the melicha, and etc. I was there once, and I saw it, and I said, whoever designed this was there at that plant. This is the Weiss packing plant back in Pittsburgh that your father was at, right? And because I just saw it, and I said, nobody would have thought of this other than the person who built it back in Pittsburgh. So I was actually with Rabbi Segal at the time, and I said, Rabbi Segal, I'm telling you that Yankel Klein was involved. Yankel Klein has been working in Postal for many years, but he was there when the plant was built in Pittsburgh. And I said, believe me, Yankel Klein was involved. So later on, we were walking through the plant, and we see Yankel Klein. I say, Yankel, come here. I said, this room over here that they recently built, right? I said, you were involved in that, right? He says, are you kidding? He said, I still have the blueprints from the plant in Pittsburgh, right?
But obviously, there is somebody not only watching. Somebody's blowing the.
They're not doing it by blowing. I believe. Well,
No,
again, I was there once. I
There's
don't
obviously
remember.
a plus with somebody physically placing the melach than just automatic.
No, it wasn't automatic. There was somebody, there were one or two people holding the hose and blowing
I don't want it to become automatic.
No, it was not automatic. It was actually, there was a mashgiach and a worker. So the mashgiach was also helping, but he was after the worker, so he could see each piece as it's passing by that the worker didn't miss anything.
Okay, so let's talk about. This is when you say a mashgiach and the worker. When you're talking about the hadacha rishona, and you're talking about the melicha. Obviously, the Lubavitcher Chassidim, the Baba Chassidim, the Bnei Torah, Yeshivish people who are learning Daf Yomi, I don't want to sound chas v'shalom racial. They're not doing the work. They're standing with the Gemara. They're standing with the Maimar Chassidus. The ones who are doing the work are the workers. The mashgichim are watching at every step. Tell me how the process.
Okay, so in the industry, it's as follows: the actual work is done by workers.
Not chas v'shalom to sound.
You don't need any special kavanah, v'chulu, right?
But you got to do a good job.
The shchita obviously has to be done by it, right? That akum, the sheshachat, it's even if he does it perfectly, it's not a shchita, it's a nevela.
But everything else could be done by a guy.
But other things such as the nikur of the gidei dam and the melicha.
Can you translate that?
The removing of the veins. Right, there's certain key veins that have to be removed.
A guy could do that.
That a guy could do.
The salting,
a guy could do.
The soaking.
The soaking could be. Usually it's automated or not. A guy could do it. Everything could be done by a guy.
Process is there.
In other words, there's no kavanah involved whatsoever. When something that needs a kavanah, the marshal does come to an house Pesach and Mitzvah Hashem, es comes to mitzvahs matzah, right? The matzahs mitzvah. So the matzahs mitzvah, there has to be a kavanah, the shem mitzvah, and the ganze garichas and Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, that with a goy, it's even a imad al gabav is health garnished.
Right.
Okay. But for these things, there's no kavanah. It's a practical thing. It has to get done. Good. But heyois, that it's something that halacha requires that it gets done.
Right.
So you have to have a yid vashat nemonis that he could be made that whatever has to be done was done.
So let's start.
How it got done doesn't matter. But you have to have somebody with a nemonis that's right. So, you know what? I'll speak about the plant we're working now. It's a brand new plant.
Without saying names.
And it's what's it called? It's pretty new and it's a small operation, right? So after the pieces of meat are deveined, the nicker, right? It goes into these big vats of water, right? What is the mishgiach's job? Two things. First, he has to make sure that all of the meat is stuck in the water, right? And nothing is sticking out.
Well, for what reason?
Because if it's sticking out, it's not getting the benefit of the shria in the water. Okay.
Hold on.
Now there's a halachic issue here.
No. Are we doing shria chatzisha?
Yes, absolutely.
Mechaber says
Chatzi Shah. That's the standard. Chatzi Shah.
everybody.
Everybody.
Mechaber Ramosh, Ashkenazim, Svardim.
Chatzi Shah. I can't speak for everybody, but from what I know.
Why does, you know, if the Svardim don't, is there Svardim that do?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is there no such a thing as Svardim today that do less?
There may, possibly, but I don't know. I can't speak.
So universally, that you know,
as far as I know, universally, at least here in this country, it's basically
everybody tries to do a Chatzi Shah.
for sure. Okay.
And Chatzi Shah, no hour, no.
But then, of course, as you certainly probably brought up in your classes, there's the different shittas of why we even need the shriya, right? To be marachet the basar, right? So if it's just be marachet the basar, then it might not matter so much if a piece is sticking out, right? But if it's beside the dambein, it has to be washed. Okay, so we're makbid that every piece has to be in the water.
So how do you make that? How do you make sure?
So you have these big vats, right? The first thing is you have to make sure this is the mashgiach's job that it doesn't get too full. Now, even if it's not full, you can have a problem because the meat will float, especially the pieces that are very lot of shuman. Shuman floats. So what we do is we put these boards on top to keep the ways down, and it keeps the
so you cover it sort of.
You take these
plastic
boards,
like a covering a swimming pool, like sort of like.
But it has to have a little bit of weight, you know, and this is how you keep it.
There's no rules what you cannot use to. There's nothing ma'akiv.
No. Okay. And what the mishgiach does, he has to mark the time, right? He marks it on a card, right? And he puts it on that vat, a timer, and then he knows that this cannot go to the melicha until after the time that he writes on the card.
And it's on wheels or something?
They have ways of moving it around. Okay. They fill up one. If the mashgiach says it's too full, they have to pull pieces out and put it in the next one. Okay, and then he closes off this one, puts the time, and nothing else can go in there.
Just out of curiosity, how many behemoths fill into one? Or
it depends how big it is, of course, but I mean the ones that we use, you could probably fit 6 seitlach, let's say. Sides of whatever. Okay. I'm guessing. I never really paid attention. It gets full, right? The mashgiach says, okay, no more. Move on. Bring the next one, right? You also want to always make sure. Also, this is part of the mashgiach's job, that before they start throwing in the shtiklach fleish, that there's some water already in it. Because if not, what happens is it gets very heavy, it sticks to the bottom, and the bottom never really gets wet. Okay? So there has to be some water already, like about a third full, before they even start putting it.
That's a practical.
It's a practical thing that to make sure that it doesn't get.
Okay, and then we learned about what the type of water, what lukewarm, cold, hot. We discussed the type of water.
Okay. After that, then they take it out, right?
Go ahead.
Take it out. Here, there's an issue. This is a halachic issue that has a practicality. How do you get it out of the things? So if you take it with a hook, right? So the hook will cut into the meat. Once you cut into the meat, there's nu dambein, then you need another. You don't need a hadocha of a half hour, but at least you have to wash it off in the place where you cut it, right? So what you have to, and this is the mashgiach's job, you have to be on top of the goyim, make sure that when they put in the hook, they have to put in the hook in the water and then pull it out, okay? If a piece of meat is sticking out, because they actually drain it, right? So they don't drain it. They leave it there, you know what I mean? It should be in the water, so they put it in the hook when the hook is in the water, right? So this way the hook is wet and whatever, and it's still in the water. So it's not a problem.
Very nice.
Okay, that's something that normally you would know, right? But this is something.
That's actually a chap in hilchos mikvois. That's not.
In mikvois, well, amayim kaidman.
Right.
Amayim kaidman. Okay.
So now we're finished with Adacha Rishena.
Right. The best thing is that you have a place before it actually goes to the melicha where it could drip a little bit, because if it's too wet, it's going to melt the salt. And
that's what the Rama says.
Exactly.
The Rama says you have to do
let it drip a little bit.
So what they hang it up? What do they do?
There's different ways, but what you could do is they have maybe like a table with
a conveyor belt.
A conveyor belt, and then it drips, and then it goes.
By itself?
Then it goes to the. It depends again. It depends on the plant, how sophisticated, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But the idea is to let it drip a little bit before. And then is the melicha. Again, mashgiach standing there over the goyim, making sure that they do.
From there till there's a mashgiach, or there's every step there's somebody watching.
It depends how big the place is. In a small place, one mashgiach can oversee it all.
Can I ask you a stupid question? Are there
There's-
movie cameras everywhere? Just
It's not necessary.
I mean, not even mechai. Bashash and Salman Ayin. You're not worried about goyim deren zacharum.
Well, that's not the Tej Basar Shinazal.
I understand, but you don't want swapping. You don't. There's always
The thing is, first of all, the meat has a simon. Okay, now it's already been cut up and so on and so forth, right? But there's a built-in simon in every piece of meat.
What's the built-in?
First of all, the fact that it was sitting in a shria, you could see the meat. You know, this meat was in the shria. Then it's also menuker, right? Menuker means that you could see the way it was cut, that it was menuker. You could look at the meat and say, this is a piece of meat that sat the shir and was menuker, right? Generally, there isn't any other meat around anyway, right? So as long as you're around, right, it doesn't have a din of basar shena salmonai. I mean, you're in the plant.
I understand. I'm just saying. Fine. There's always people around.
There's always people around. If it happens that meat has to be left overnight, so that means that the mashgichim leave the plant.
They're the last ones to leave.
Whatever it is, if the meat is left behind and there's no one around, it has to get sealed with all the halachas
But
of
the
that.
Yidden are the last ones to leave. The mashgiach will always be the last one to leave.
No. But before the mashgiach leaves, he has to make sure that the meat is sealed with simonim, so that you don't have the issue of basar shebazam.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, please. There's no such thing as a stupid question, right?
Okay, so we're now up to melicha. So we spoke about the salt. Now, again, Sfardim Ashkenazim, do we do an hour?
Yes, that is the standard industry.
You don't know anybody does shir hilch mil. Nobody does 24 minutes, 18 minutes.
18, 24. No, certainly not lichatchila. Now, has it ever happened a b'diavad? That I don't know. If there would be a situation where there was an emergency, you call up the rabbonim, and the rabbonim will paskin, whatever they paskin. You know, if they hold that it's a b'diavad. If it's a shasat chak, okay, I don't know.
So
that's in the books.
Okay.
But practically speaking, no, that's not the way the industry is set up.
How do you measure the hour?
Same thing. Once it's salted, it goes into a different kind of a vat. This vat now is vats with holes all around all sides.
Kli menukav.
It has to be menukav. It's more than menukav.
What do you use a kli menukav?
Also, big giant vats, but it's like.
I've gone to Postville, and I've seen a conveyor belt going upward on a muckim midran.
Okay, so then it's
Muckim midran. How do you have?
No, we put them into vats, but
What's a vat?
these big square tubs, right?
So what's the kli menukav?
It's like more than menukav. It's what's it called? It's
A strainer.
like a strainer.
So what's wrong with it? I like
There's
that.
nothing wrong.
I like that because it takes about an hour to get to the top, and then it dumps straight into the.
Yeah.
So how do you have it?
Same thing. Once they fill up a thing, mashgiach puts a card with the time on it. This one's closed off. No more goes in there.
And then.
And then they start the next one.
No, but how do you know when the hour is up? You just a timer, and then how do you know?
He has a watch. He has a thing. And he puts a card and puts the time, and then nobody touches it until that time comes. And that's what the mashgiach does. The mashgiach makes sure that nobody touches this until it. Okay.
So you've seen both. You've seen what I've.
I think I've seen something similar to that. Yeah. But there's
so many other ways.
So many different.
Which other ways? What other ways
just
have you
innovative different ways. I've seen hanging them on strings, right, and then going on a thing on a moving
for an hour.
For an hour. There's all different ways. But the bottom line is that it gets salted for an hour. However you do it. It's
have you seen different ways?
And the mashgiach is there to verify that it does not go into the hadacha before the hour is up.
Could you speak a minute for the split chickens? We spoke a minute split or how heavily have you seen different ways how to be melicha Anything? I don't know.
Honestly, chickens is
Or
is
meats.
not my field. Okay, I'm sheikhet vergases, beikar. I don't work not on the industry level in chickens. I'm somewhat aware of the issue, right? I assume that it's just a practical thing because it's just hard for the mashgichim to be able to verify that there was actually salt everywhere inside the cavity as well.
Have you seen different ways how to be melicha meat? Is there different standards of how to be melicha meat, or everybody? Is there one standard?
I'll tell you, there is an issue. It's not so much about halacha. It's a practical thing about the meat being on a place and then throwing the salt on it, or having a big table like that, right, and having the meat in the salt and being megalgal, roll it in the salt and so.
Which is better?
Okay, so yesh bezeh mashem bezeh, veyesh bezeh mashem bezeh. Each has its advantages. Okay. Let's start with putting it into this big thing, right? That has its advantage that it's getting salt everywhere.
If you put
because the goyim are working fast and they're not looking fast, so they're throwing salt, and making sure that it gets very. The problem is that the salt starts getting wet after a while. Okay.
Because it's coming wet.
Because it's coming wet and it's in a closed area, right? And the meat's coming and it's rolling in the salt and the salt gets wet.
And this is one guy doing all the meat?
No, it depends. It could be 3, 4. It depends how fast and how much you're doing. How do you resolve that issue? You constantly keep throwing new salt in. Just keep throwing new salt and new salt, okay? So that's part of the job. Mashgiach standing there, making sure if he sees it's getting a little too wet, keep throwing new salt. In order to avoid the issue of the wet, is the salt is in the dryer and you're taking the salt and throwing it on the meat, right? The problem is then it's very difficult to make sure that it was take covered well, especially when you're talking about doing high volume at a quick pace. It's very difficult. The hachra of most of the people in the industry about how to set it up is by dumping it into the salt. You get it salted much better. The issue of what's it called of it being wet.
It's better than the alternative.
It's better than the alternative. Just keep on adding other salt. This way it's salted well, right? And it just, practically speaking, that's what most rabbanim prefer. Okay.
What about what you started off blowing?
Well, that I saw only once, and that was in that plant back. Yeah.
Very nice.
I only saw that once. It worked well then. I mean, everybody was spileless, but it had a different issue that it was corroding the whole plant.
Maybe the government doesn't allow it. I don't know.
Probably it's